Alright, so I'm making this video real quick to clear up a couple of things, and this is we'll add this to my Qabalah videos. So there's a lot of information going on around L and how L is tied to Saturn specifically and this kind of thing. It's caused a lot of confusion. It's caused a lot of people to run around and be afraid of things. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information on this and hopefully help Santos out in the process on this. So let's hear what he has to say real quick.
There's rivalry between those two planets, and it's usually portrayed as two brothers, twin brothers, or a male and a feminine aspect. For instance, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, or Jesus and Satan, you see? And Saturn always gets to play the negative part, because Saturn is... The relationship between Saturn and the Sun is this.
Okay, so what he's implying here is that Saturn is Satan, okay? Mary Magdalene and Jesus, or Satan and Jesus. And so he's referring to Saturn as Satan, which is what you'll also hear Jordan Maxwell refer to Saturn as. Saturn is being L and also Satan. And this is where the Saturn equals Satan stuff comes from. I'm going to go into a little bit of this with you. I'm going to show you a couple of Qabalah documents. He's going to throw some more words out. I'm going to show you what their real meaning is inside the Bible, rather than what he's giving you. And we're going to use the Strong's Concordance Dictionary, which is the most famous of all of the interpretations of the King James Bible, and their names and their origins and so forth. So let's continue.
The Sun is the primary of the solar system right now, but probably around about 15,000 years ago it was Saturn.
Now all of this, by the way, mind you, is all an opinion. There's no evidence of this at all. And if you take a look at any of the Qabalah texts and so forth, you won't find any evidence of this at all. This comes from what he's heard from the Thunderbolts.info channel, which has a lot of good information. But he's derived something that's completely a fabrication at this point, because there is no evidence of this, and none of the Qabalah texts or anything point to anything like this. I just want to give that to you real quick.
And Saturn, according to the scientists at Thunderbolts.info, Wallace Thornhill and those guys there, the position of Saturn was in a northerly position. It was the sun of this solar system, and it was in a coaxial relationship with the Earth. And in between Saturn and the Earth there was Venus and Mars. So it was a coaxial relationship, you see. And Saturn was always in the northern heavens as the sun of this solar system. Then 15,000 years ago, there was a switch. This sun turns up. Now, Saturn's orbit takes 29.5 years. And that's the magic number, because it relates to the sun in 29.5 year cycles, just as the moon relates to the Earth in 29.5 day cycles.
The sun actually has 11-year cycles, not 29.5-year cycles.
Yes. So you see this powerful relationship between the Earth and the moon, the sisters, Isis and Nephthys, you know, and they are in a phase-lock sort of orbit with each other, but it's very powerful. And the moon is very influential over this orb, the Earth, her sister. And it causes the tides and things like that, or at least it affects that. And we see the effect of the moon with people on full moons with insanity and etc., all of those things. Well, Saturn does the same with the sun. And astrologers know that when Saturn is in transit, meaning when Saturn is in a position in your birth chart where you might have some certain frictions like afflictions. Okay, now this is astrological language, but it's still science. When Saturn comes to those returns, those transits and stuff like that, people notice it. They notice it. People who are aware. Not the average person, they don't know anything about this, but Astrologers know the effect of Saturn. They know the effect of the moon, primarily. These two are the most powerful, without a doubt, in the solar system and in astrology. So, but in mythology, you'll find that one is electric and one is magnetic. Right? It's always like that. The relationship is always like that. And I'm pointing out the fact that L, which is the word, well, electricity derives from L. L is one of those words that turns up in the mythologies all the time. You have Emmanuel, Israel, the Bible, Babel, the bell for Baal that you have in the chapel and steeple and cathedral, and you go to the altar to worship El or Allah. All of these L words that have to do with masculinity, because the letter L is lamed in Hebrew and it is erect. It is the male phallic, the obelisk. So, and that is pretty much the sun. It's a sundial, and the sun is phallic. El, Elohim, or Elios. But Saturn also gets the title of El. So there's always this friction between. Saturn is known as Baal, or Baal, or Bel, or just plain old El.
Actually, this is incorrect. And if you take a look at the Qabalah texts, you will see this. Right here, you're taking a look at a Qabalah Unveiled. This is actually a document that was created in the 1887. It's very easy to find online, sacred texts. What you'll find is that these words mean something completely different. El, just by itself, is actually referring to Chesed, which is actually referring to Jupiter and not to Saturn. But all of these have these L words in it. Bina, which is Saturn, which has nothing to do with Satan, but actually has something to do with understanding. We can see this right here also inside this same document. Saturn, Bina, which actually means the mother supernal, and Bina actually stands for understanding. We can take a look in the Bible, for example, and we can look up the word understanding. And if we look at anything like in the first 5 books of the Bible, which is where a lot of the Kabbalah stuff is easy to find, you'll find things like this. And I filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom and in understanding and in knowledge. And so when you take a look at these texts, you'll see that wisdom represents the father, Hokmah. Understanding represents the mother. And knowledge represents Doth. And it's actually very Kabbalistic, as you will see inside of these, and we'll go into that later. But let's take a look at Saturn real quick, that's being called Satan. Okay, so Saturn means understanding. And if we take a look, and for Exodus, for example, and we look at the word understanding, as you can see, it's feminine, and it represents Bina, or understanding. So right here, if we take a look at H394, which is where understanding comes from, it says the second and third forms being feminine from H995, and we take a look at that, it says Bina. Bina represents understanding. It says to separate mentally, to distinguish, that is generally understand. And this is very important in Qabalah because the understanding is what we're trying to reach, and the understanding represents the heart. So actually Saturn represents the heart. It doesn't represent Satan at all. And let me show you something written in the Zohar real quick about Bina and understanding, and it'll give you a little bit more idea. And I'll show you something from this Freemason site that we have right here, showing the Tetragrammaton and how the Tetractys is related to this, and how the heart is related to Saturn. When we take a look at the Tetractys, we have this unity up here, and the way that these letters are stacked in Hebrew is what you'll see in many, many Qabalah texts dating all the way back to a very long time ago. When this splits from this unity, it splits into mind and it splits into heart. And this is from the Zohar. He explains his words, thus the smoke arises from Bina, which is in the heart. This is Bina right here. So right here we have Kether, and then we have Chokmah, and then we have Bina. And you can see them right here, okay? And it zigzags down the tree. At the next line we have the sun, okay? And the sun is also representative of the heart, but moving up, because the sun rises up the tree of life. When he rises up to the Trinity area right here, where his head is actually touching where he is shown being crucified on the cross, at this point he has connected the heart to mind, because the heart is Bina. So it says, from Bina, which is in the heart, considered to be an understanding heart, it rises to Chokmah, which is like the brain. So we have the heart and we have the brain, which is the smoke. It is the central column, Zer Anpin, this guy right here, the central column, that rises, okay, Jesus has ridden, this is Zer Anpin, the same thing, rises and unites Chokmah and Bina, and becomes dat, or knowledge to them, the secret of a heart that understands knowledge. This is what they don't want you to know. And a lot of people don't dig into this kind of stuff. But Saturn has nothing to do with Satan. It has to do with understanding. And so as this guy, Zer Anpin, which is Jesus or you or any man out there that rises up the tree of life and connects Chokmah and Bina, he's connecting the heart with the mind. Now we can also think of this psychologically as well. For example, when things come into existence in your mind, they first become a flash of knowledge. And that is Kether moving to Chokmah. That's the flash of knowledge. But that flash of knowledge is still abstract and it doesn't mean anything. So the first thing that you start to do is, when something comes into your mind like a flash of information, is you start to make sense of it. And that's what Bina does. It takes the flash of information and it makes an understanding. It begins to understand what that means. It organizes it into something understandable. And psychologically, this is what it means as well. Now let's take a look at the information from here. This is the same thing. And so when we take a look at the tree of life on here, if we move up the tree of life, this Sephiroth right here represents Bina. And if you take a look at these blue ones, you have the same thing that I showed you here. The same symbol for Bina here, which is the heart, is the same symbol for the heart here. This heart here rises up this tree of life and connects the heart to the mind. This area up here is the Trinity. This area right here is the center area. And down here represents Earth. So this has nothing to do with that at all. And if we take a look at the texts, like I showed you, and also you'll see that the names, Elohim, Elohim Gibor, El, okay, we have Eloah, Elohim. Saturn does not specifically get the word El. Many of these things do. And you can also take a look at the site. This is from smphillips.8m.com. This is the holistic pattern. And if we take a look at the God names that are associated with these various things, we can see that Chesed, which is mercy, which is Jupiter, is actually the El by itself. Geburah, which has to do with Mars, is Eloah. And then we have the sun, which is Shemesh, and that has to do with Elohim, Yahweh, Elohim. And then we have Yahweh, Sabaoth. So as you can see, this Elohim, El, it's all over these various planets. Saturn doesn't get it itself. Up here at the very top, we have Kether, which is the I am, and then we have Chokmah, which is wisdom, and then we have Bina. It stands for rest, right here in the mundane chakra. but it also stands for understanding in Qabalah. The numbers that you see associated to those are numbers associated to the gematria of the various God names, and this has to do with geometry as well. Now let's just take a look at a few things where understanding is applied, and we will see that understanding, or Saturn, is actually tied to the heart, just like the Zohar says. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart, which is exactly what the Zohar says. I can type in heart here for just a second, and we'll type in understanding. And we can see more of this. Behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and understanding heart. Understanding is the word Bina. Bina stands for Saturn. And God gave Solomon wisdom, Chokmah, and understanding, Bina, exceeding much and largest of heart. Who hath put wisdom, Chokmah, in the inward parts, who has given understanding, Bina, to the heart. Give me understanding, and I shall keep thy law, yea, I shall observe it with my whole heart. As you can see, Bina is associated to the heart. It is a receptive thing. It takes the wisdom, the flash from Kether, and it takes that information and it organizes it and puts it into understanding. The doth that comes from that, doth is actually when the understanding has been created and put into action, and that is doth, and that is knowledge. So I hope this clears up the whole thing. Saturn is not Satan, and if we take a look at anything from the Kabbalistic diagrams, which I'll show you a couple of right now. Here's one from Kircher showing the progression as we move up the tree of life. The sun in the middle represents the balance in between the spiritual and the earth. And so we move up, we have the tree of life. We have the moon, then Mercury, then Venus, then the sun, then Mars, then Jupiter, then Saturn, and then we have the fixed stars, and then we have Kether. And if you can see, this is one big sun, and this actually represents the nebula. This is where things begin. This is where the stars and all of the planets come from and are born from. And this is why when you see in Qabalah, you see that all of the other Sephiroth are born from Kether, because that's where all of these guys come from. They don't just create themselves out of thin air, out in space. They're created by nebulas. And that's why the Kether is also related to the nebula. We can see this in also the document by William G. Gray called The Ladder of Lights, where he also mentions that the nebula is Kether. So, anyways, the purpose of this video was to show you that the Saturn L thing is not correct the way it's being told to people, and it has nothing to do with Satan at all. It is the supernal mother, and it has something to do with understanding, which is exactly what you're trying to reach. You're trying to reach the point of connecting the Chokmah, which is wisdom, to Saturn, which is understanding. And that is Zer Anpin rising up the tree of life and crucified up there right in between the two, which is what the symbolism is showing there. So anyways, I hope that helps you guys, and I'll talk to you soon.